We've had a look at how you refer to cells, ranges, rows and columns. But continuing with the Excel object model, we need to also know how to refer to sheets and to workbooks. You can refer to a workbook in three ways. You can declare my file, for example, as a workbook, and then you can refer to that workbook either by its name in double quotes. So I could set my file as equaling the workbook, and in brackets and in double quotes, I'll put the name of that file, like budget.xls. Or I could say that it's the first workbook that was opened. So instead of referring or setting to the workbook as its name, I would just put workbooks and then 1 in brackets, which is the first workbook I opened. Or the third way that you can declare or work with a workbook is to go declare my file as a workbook and then set my file as the active workbook. And that's the one we're currently looking at. And I have to say that's probably the most common way that we refer to a workbook is the active workbook. Now when it comes to worksheets or sheets, there's also the ability to declare my sheet as a worksheet. And then there's three ways to reference my sheet. You can say my sheet is equal to sheets, and then in brackets and inside a double quotes you can actually put the name of the sheet. So it might be sheet 1, or it might be region 1, or it might be workshop 1, but whatever its name is. Or you can say my sheet is equal to sheets and then the 1 in brackets, which means it's the first sheet. So it's talking about its position, it's not talking about its name. And then the third way you can refer to a sheet is my sheet equals the active sheet. Let's have a look at a particular sub-procedure called object variable. I've created a new file and I've saved it as chapter 5 and it's a macro-enabled workbook. I'm then going to go over to my Visual Basic Editor and insert a module. I'll then name that module using my properties mod objects. I'll then go to my code file and I'll find the sub-procedure called object variable. I'll then select object variable, sub-object variable to end sub, and I'll copy it and paste it into my Visual Basic Editor. Then to actually test it, and I'll just resize things a little bit here, what I've got here is I've got a sub-procedure that declares my file as a workbook, and then it sets my file as the active workbook. Workbooks like to be set. Then my file is to have a sheet added, and that sheet is to be added after the last sheet, and that's why it's counting the sheet. If it was after the first sheet, then in those brackets would be a 1, but it's after the last sheet. And then it's naming that sheet I'm new. So let's give this a go. If I press F8, it's going to add a sheet after the sheet count. Now the sheet count is 3. There happens to be 3 sheets in this file, and so it's going to add it after, giving me sheet 4, which I can see here. And if I then press F8, it'll name it I'm new, and then I finish the sub-procedure. So that particular piece of code is referring to a workbook and referring to a sheet. Let's have a look at another sub-procedure. I'll go back to my code file, and this time I want to grab the sub-procedure Excel objects. So I go from the sub to the end sub, and I copy, go back to my Visual Basic Editor, and paste. Now some things are red here, so that concerns me. Red is never a good colour in the Visual Basic Editor. So I'm just going to close my property windows and close my Project Explorer and have a good look at this. Okay, sometimes when we copy and paste stuff from Word into the Visual Basic Editor or from other sources, things may not wrap entirely correctly. So the whole idea here with the Word document is that was actually on a separate line. Whoops, let me just go. Okay, and undo. That was actually on a separate line, and that was on a separate line. And that's why the underscore was there. So that makes the red go away. But I would say that we actually don't need that underscore, so I'm going to delete it and join those two lines up together. There we go. So the whole idea here, if I bring Excel back into view and let them share the space that I have to work with, Okay, and I might save as well. The whole idea here is I'm declaring my file as a workbook. I'm setting my file as the active workbook. When I press F8, it will ultimately go to the cell A1. In the cell A1, it'll put the value, the number of workbooks currently open is. So it's going to put some text, and then hence the double quotes, and then an ampersand, and it's going to count the number of workbooks I have open, which when I rest on it tells me I only have one workbook open. So if I press F8, it will actually say the number of workbooks currently open is 1. It will then, when I press F8, go to A2, and it'll say the name of the workbook is, and it'll tell me the name of my file. So when I press F8, the name of my workbook is chapter5.xlsm. If I press F8, it'll go to A3. Now it's going to, in A3, give me the full name of my file, which is not only its name, chapter 5, but also its path. If I go to A4, it'll then say the number of sheets in this workbook are, and it'll count the number of sheets. And there are 4 sheets in here because the subprocedure above object variable added a 4th sheet. If I then press F8, it'll select the first sheet, and from there it will then select the last sheet, and then it will name that sheet summary, and then it'll select, well, it'll actually delete sheet 2, and it'll ask me, do I want to delete it? So I go delete, and then it will add a sheet before sheet 1 called sheet 5, and it will name it, when I press F8, trial balance. So there's various statements in there that will name a sheet, add a sheet, delete a sheet, select a sheet, whether it be the first one or the last one, and it will also count sheets. And there are things there also about how you ascertain the name, the full name, and how many workbooks you've got open. If I didn't want it to pop up and ask me if I wanted to delete a sheet, just to take you back to something that we did back in chapter 2, that would be application full stop display alerts equals false, and that would stop the message coming up. Before it deleted sheet 2, that statement would be run, and it would just simply delete sheet 2 without asking you any questions. I'd now like you to give project 3 a go.